From sports radio to television to barbershops across the country, you'll hear discussions about who's the best quarterbacks in the NFL, who's overhyped, who's a bust, and where do all of these players rank. Today, I'm going to give you guys an insight into who I think are the top 15 quarterbacks heading into the 2020 NFL season. Hey everybody, welcome back to a special episode of Inside the Numbers with Chris and Croc. Today's probably going to seem a little different because, if you haven't noticed by now, Eric Crocker's not here. That's because he's currently moving across the country. He's a little indisposed at the moment, but that's okay because we've got great segments set up where I'm going to discuss with you guys who I think are personally the top 15 NFL quarterbacks heading into the 2020 season. We got a lot to talk about, so I don't want to waste a lot of your time with a bunch of fluff. But before we jump right into it, I do have a couple honorable mentions that I want to discuss with you guys in Ryan Tannehill and Phillip Rivers. I had a really hard time leaving either one of these guys off of the list, especially Tannehill, considering the season that he had last year. And I think people forget exactly just how good Ryan Tannehill was because he had a couple bad seasons peppered in there. But conversely, I couldn't see myself leaving any of the other 15 guys that I do have the list for either one of them. So Ryan Tannehill, Phillip Rivers, and their fans, I apologize. They won't be making the list, but you guys were right there. All right, now this first guy is probably going to raise a couple eyebrows, but I have Baker Mayfield at number 15. The reason for that is because in 2019, he did start all 16 games, but he did have a pretty up and down year. Like a lot of things just really didn't seem to work for him too well. He didn't even complete 60% of his passes. And he had almost a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio with 22 TDs and 21 interceptions. And he only had a 78 passer rating. Not very good. But everything that could have gone wrong for Baker Mayfield last year did go wrong for Baker Mayfield. Like, his offensive line was absolutely atrocious. There was a lot of drops. Coaching was terrible. Now, I get it. Expectations were really high coming off his 2018 rookie season. And then when you add an elite weapon like Odell Beckham Jr., you're not going to do anything but add more pressure to you. And I get that. But again, his offensive line was so bad last year that they had a left tackle that they cut right before the start of the season, and he was never claimed off of waivers. Now, he was also one of the most pressured quarterbacks last season. I think he was third or fourth. But when you look at his pressure conversion rate to actual sacks, he showed a lot of poise, and he avoided a lot of those pressures. I do expect a retooled offensive line and a better coaching staff to improve his play in 2020. And I think he's poised to have a pretty decent year. All right, now this next guy is probably also going to create a little bit of controversy, but at number 14, I have Kyler Murray. 2019 was a pretty good rookie season. He completed almost 65% of his passes, threw for about 3,800 yards. 7 yards per attempt, which is really good. 20 touchdowns, only 12 interceptions. He had a pretty good year, and he was on a relatively bad team. And the little success that they did have, it was because of him. Now, again, they didn't have very much success, but Kyler Murray's individual rookie season was definitely one. So much so that he ended up winning the NFL Rookie of the Year, right? So he did have his low points, but I think his arm talent and his ability to make plays with his legs definitely makes him a big play threat every time he touches the ball. He's going to need to do a better job of avoiding pressures and just running into sacks and also avoiding turnover-worthy situations and plays. But like I said, they have a better supporting cast around him right now, and don't be surprised if Kyler Murray creeps into top 10 discussion at the end of the season. Now, at number 13, I've got Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, anybody that knows me knows I have my personal critiques of Jimmy Garoppolo, and those are all valid, and I stand by those. But if you dig a little bit deeper into some of those metrics, some of the advanced analytics, you start to find that he does deserve a little bit more credit than even pundits like myself would give him credit for in the past, right? Because he completed almost 70% of his passes, threw for almost 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 13 interceptions. He was incredibly efficient. Jimmy Garoppolo showed well in his first full season as a starter, and you got to hand it to him. He did help lead the 49ers to a Super Bowl appearance. Now, he also did benefit greatly from his situation in San Francisco because even though he didn't have a star-studded receiving core, he did have the league's number one rushing offense and one of the most dominant defenses, not even taking into account a league's top 3 play caller in Kyle Shanahan. But Garoppolo does deserve credit for being one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. He finished fourth on target percentage with a tick over 80%. That is incredible. I don't care what type of offense you run, West Coast spread, doesn't matter. If you're completing, if you're throwing balls at an on-target percentage of 80%, that's incredibly efficient. I expect with the weapons that they added, especially in the offseason and in the NFL draft, he could have a similar year, potentially even better. Now, at number 12, I've got Kirk Cousins, quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. In 2019, Kirk Cousins had an impressive season, probably the best he's ever had, completing almost 70% of his passes. He threw for 3,600 yards and 26 TDs to only 6 interceptions. Now, he was blessed with one of the best supporting casts in the NFL, but much like Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins put together an impressive 2019 campaign. He was absolutely lethal on play action, and he ranked 8th in completion percentage on those plays at 71.8%, yards per attempt at 9.7, 4th in passing yards in play action at 1,300, and a passer rating of 129.2. While Cousins isn't the type of quarterback who can win regardless of his supporting cast, 2019 did prove that he can play at an extremely high level if he does have a good one. I think he's still primed to have a good year, and as long as that team can figure out what they're doing on defense, even if they're falling behind, Cousins is going to light it up this season again. Now, a guy who I have at number 11 is probably going to rub some people the wrong way, but just hear me out. At number 11, I've got Ben Roethlisberger, Pittsburgh Steelers. 2019, he didn't really play. In fact, I think he missed the entire season almost with an elbow injury. And he's not exactly young either, sitting at 37. But Pittsburgh still has weapons on that offense. And losing Antonio Brown hurts, but Ben Roethlisberger is still extremely capable of putting together a productive season. He wasn't great in the one full game that he was healthy for 2019, but that was against the Patriots, who had the league's best defense, I believe. So I'm not really going to hold that against him. And one game is simply too small of a sample size to learn much from if we're trying to talk about if he's lost a step or if he's fallen off a cliff. Because when healthy, especially in 2018, Ben Roethlisberger finished 5th in PFF in terms when it comes to big-time throws, and he absolutely lit up that season. In fact, I had him on my team for fantasy that year, and he in 2 leagues, he was my starting quarterback on 2 championship teams. So the potential's there, and they still have weapons, and he's still really good. He's got a few years left. I think he's probably primed to have a pretty big breakout year, considering he's coming off an injury. Don't be surprised if Ben Roethlisberger is a prime candidate for comeback player of the year. Now, starting off our top 10, I've got Deshaun Watson, quarterback of the Houston Texans. Now, before you guys start to crucify me, hear me out. In 2019, he completed 67% of his passes, 3,800 yards, 26 TDs, and only 12 interceptions. He also ran for another 413 yards and 7 touchdowns. Electric. I get it. And I'm going to start off with some of the things that I do like. Because much like Wilson, Deshaun Watson has proven to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league despite playing behind one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. He has the capabilities. He has the intangibles that we're looking for. Because when he's on, he's one of the most exciting quarterbacks that we can probably watch. But on the negative side, Watson needs to improve on his ball security tremendously. Because he fumbled 10 times to go along with those 12 interceptions. All of this without mentioning he just lost arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL in DeAndre Hopkins. Now, you'll probably have him higher than me on your personal lists, but I couldn't justify putting him any higher than the guys ahead of him. Now, number 9, I have Matt Ryan, quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. In 2019, Matt Ryan completed 66% of his passes for almost 4,500 passing yards, 26 TDs, and only 14 interceptions. I admit, it was a frustrating year for Matt Ryan and the Falcons, who disappointed the entire city and a lot of fans around the country with only going 7-9. The reality is that last year he was pressured, I think, almost 270 times, which is like 30 times more than any other quarterback in the NFL. And now, granted, he wasn't terrible in pressured situations, but he wasn't good either because he only finished around 13th to 15th in passer rating to go along with only 8 touchdowns and 5 interceptions being pressured. But my justification for putting him above Deshaun Watson is the fact that he has chemistry with Julio Jones and he still has Julio Jones. So I expect Matt Ryan to have a bounce back season, and he could, be in line for a pretty big year. Now, at number 8, I've got Carson Wentz, quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. Man, 2019 was an absolute crazy year for Carson Wentz because he did play very well. He completed almost 64% of his passes, threw for 4,000 yards, 27 TDs, and only 7 interceptions. He also rushed for another touchdown and tacked on an extra 245 yards rushing. So he was kind of doing it all. Carson Wentz was hampered by a host of injuries to that offense, though, and thanks to the Dallas Cowboys' incompetence, he still led the Philadelphia Eagles to the playoffs. Carson Wentz's general accuracy took a dip in 2019, and he finished 25th on target percentage at only 72%. Not very good. Now, even when he was accurate, though, he still dealt with a lot of drops that weren't really his fault, and he was also throwing to wide receivers that they were pulling off of the street, and guys were applying from Twitter. And I mean, I don't know, honestly, but I wouldn't be surprised. So he's going to need to get better in his on-target percentage. My big question for him is still going to be, can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, he has the capabilities of being in the top 5. And they did add, some weapons in the offseason, shored up some of the issues that they had in the secondary. So Carson Wentz could be in line for a big year. My questions are still the same. Can he stay healthy? Can he improve on his on-target percentage passes? Now, coming in at number 7, I've got Dak Prescott, quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. In 2019, Dak Prescott had a breakthrough season, completing 65% of his passes, throwing for almost 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and only 11 interceptions. He also added on an extra 277 yards on the ground with 3 rushing touchdowns to add to his totals. And a lot of that was because of Kellen Moore being his play caller. He had an outstanding season that displayed a lot of improvement, no more noticeable than in his throwing mechanics. He also finished 4th in the NFL in deep ball percentage completed. So it lets us know that collectively he was playing much better. Now, his productivity could have actually been a lot better if most of his weapons didn't have a season-long case of Butterfingers, because he led the league at an alarmingly large margin with 36 dropped passes. He does see a decline in his play when it comes to the red zone. So for me, he can't get any higher on this list until he improves on his red zone percentage, because he's sitting just a tick under 50%. And that's not just for last year. That's just for his whole career. If he can improve on his red zone efficiency, I have no reason to believe that he can't jump into the top 5 discussion, maybe even top 3 in the NFL. They got to pay this man before he starts to get more expensive. Now, coming in at number 6, I've got Aaron Rodgers, quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. 2019 was kind of an anomaly for Aaron Rodgers because while he still played well, throwing for over 4,000 yards, he had 26 TDs and only 4 interceptions. He wasn't that efficient, and he actually was kind of bad in like a lot of the danger throws when it comes to looking at some of those deep dive metrics. The dirty little secret in the NFL is that Aaron Rodgers has been on a steady decline in recent years. But don't get it twisted. He's still one of the best quarterbacks in the league whose high-end play is unrivaled by anyone not named Patrick Mahomes. There's just more variance in his game than ever before, and he can do things that no other quarterback seems to be able to do. He's just Houdini out on the field. Now, he's finally benefiting from a good defense and an effective running game, and Rodgers led Green Bay to 13 wins. But most of us can agree that the Green Bay Packers were a bad 13-win team, and that defense got exposed in the run game. You can probably expect Aaron Rodgers to have another big year because he's going to just have to air it out because teams are just going to run the football down their throats. All in all, Aaron Rodgers is still absolutely elite, but he does fall out of that top 5 category for me moving into 2020. Now, coming in at number 5, I've got Tom Brady, quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The greatest quarterback in NFL history finally saw a notable decline in his play in 2019, but he still had a pretty good season, completing 60% of his passes, throwing for over 4,000 yards, 24 TDs, and only 8 interceptions. One of the areas, though, where Tom Brady's decline is most evident is in his effectiveness while he's being pressured. He's never been that good at it, but he was the number 1 quarterback at avoiding pressures in 2017, dropping all the way down to 29th in 2019. Now, he still does a really good job of avoiding turnovers, and he's still incredibly lethal in the short to intermediate passing game, and we can't ignore that this is the most loaded offense the GOAT has ever been in. I can't imagine an offense where Jameis Winston throws for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, and old man Brady can't be successful in it. Keep in mind, his play caller is Bruce Arians. They're going to be throwing the football a lot. Tom Brady's going to have a big year. Now, coming in at number 4, I've got Drew Brees, quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. Even at 40 years old, while battling a thumb injury for much of the season, Drew Brees still proved to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, completing 74% of his passes, throwing for almost 3,000 yards in limited games, 27 TDs, and only 4 interceptions. Brees is unquestionably the most accurate quarterback we've ever seen in the NFL, and he's led the league in adjusted completion percentage, which is drop passes, throwaways, spike balls, in total for years over years. It's just incredible. Now, Brees isn't getting any younger, and he's yet to commit to another NFL season past this one, but you can expect him to still be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's got weapons all over the place, and they added Emmanuel Sanders, who can now take the top off of the defense. And you still have one of, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL in Michael Thomas. Alvin Kamara is still going to be a great complement as a receiving back. Just overall, he's still set up to have a great season. And there's no way I felt I could justify leaving one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history off of my top 5 list. Now, moving on to number 3. I've got Lamar Jackson, quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens. Or best throwing running back the NFL's ever seen. I don't know. Either way you want to look at it, his 2019 was phenomenal. He completed 66% of his passes. While only throwing for 3,100 yards, he did have 36 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. Where his true value came in is he rushed another 176 times for 1,200 yards and 7 TDs. The epitome of what a dual threat quarterback looks like. This is the type of guy that you just build in a video game, plug and play him in, run your My Career on it, and just hope you make the Hall of Fame. Because Lamar Jackson is probably the most difficult player in the NFL to defend. He's an electric runner, extremely efficient passer, but he did lead the league in expected points per added per play on his way to deserving NFL MVP. He runs a unique offense by NFL standards, mainly because he's probably the only guy that can be a quarterback in that style of offense. And although most of the focus is on his exhilarating running ability, Lamar Jackson has an ability to be a pretty efficient passer and an ever-improving passer and an offense that's pretty much catered to all of his strengths. They have great weapons on the outside, and I expect him to continue his success in 2020. Coming in at number 2, I've got Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Russell Wilson didn't have quite as good of a year as Lamar Jackson. I know I'm going to get some flack for that on who's second, who's third, but it was closer than a lot of people want to believe. He completed 66% of his passes, threw for 4,100 yards, 31 TDs, and only 5 interceptions. He also ran for 3 TDs and added on another 342 yards rushing. I think for Russell Wilson, his track record puts him above Lamar Jackson here. He plays behind a below-average offensive line, and the level of difficulty for Russell Wilson is often dialed to a 10. For example, he was pressured 40% of his dropbacks, which was third most in the NFL. And even with those volume of pressures, Russell Wilson was still more effective than most quarterbacks, finishing with the third highest passer rating when pressured at 89.7. If there's a clutch gene, Russell Wilson has it. All in all, I think it's a clear-cut decision that Russell Wilson is number 2 on this list, despite Lamar Jackson's fantastic MVP season. And if you hadn't guessed it by now, coming in at number 1, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. In 2018, he won the league MVP. In 2019, he won the Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. Patrick Mahomes is currently the king of the NFL castle at the moment, and I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future either. Now, he wasn't quite as good as his absurd 50-touchdown season in 2018, but Patrick Mahomes, when healthy, still puts on a show almost every game that he plays. He's one of the league's most creative players, and he has that rare ability to be equally effective inside and outside of the play structure. It's like, even if the play breaks down, it looks almost as good as it would if the play went off without a hitch. There's not a quarterback on the planet who's more talented and more consistently effective than Patrick Mahomes. And I don't see any scenario where we can't expect an equally dangerous Pat Mahomes in 2020. And for me, he's got to be the number 1 leading candidate for MVP and maybe even to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl again. Look for Patrick Mahomes to have a fantastic season in 2020. All right, man. That was a lot to cover, but I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I had a lot of fun making that video, and I think for the most part, I pretty much nailed that list of who I believe the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL are going to be heading into the 2020 season. Now, if you like the content me and Eric put out, please like, subscribe, and share our videos. We enjoy making this content for you guys, and we love sharing our knowledge with you guys as well. If you have any questions about this video or anything else football related, please let us know by dropping a comment in the below. If you don't think we got this list right, or if you disagree with one of our takes, let us know. We want to thank you guys again for tuning in to Inside the Numbers, and we'll see you next time.